The Digital 2.0 series was more of a curiosity to me. And a lot of it came down to I wanted to hear from folks that had been going through this for the last decade and how they've kind of changed their approaches, especially as we got into post-COVID and going through, major changes when we're not all in the office anymore. So getting a feel for what's changed in the approaches and the different ways that people were bringing innovation to the market was kind of the big piece for me. So if I'm going to boil it all down, curiosity. And that kind of drives everything that I do anyway, is I want to learn more and hear more. And some of the stories we got over the last year have been, in some cases, awe-inspiring, but also consistent, which is the kind of the cool part, right? Not a lot has changed in the way that people still approach this stuff. So it comes down to it. When we first came up with this idea, hey, let's go out there and let's start talking to some folks about this. It was just an open-mindedness and a curiosity that was driving me. And it turned into really a cool, inspirational series because we're finding out that even through the struggles that some folks had in 2020, there's continual change.
I was nervous, and my nervousness was these people, why do they want to spend time talking to me and taking time out of their busy day? And I felt like I was going to be dealing with hostile participants. So I was pensive is probably the best term to use for it. I was pleasantly surprised and echo a lot of what Geremy said. Like I found the opposite. I found enthusiasm. I found engagement. And it blew me away that these people were willing to engage in a back and forth dialogue on the topic. It made me feel good. I kind of expected the dialogue to be very technology or technical focused. And I loved hearing people talk not about the technology, but about the goal, being upfront about the goals, the results, the people, the human aspect around it. The importance of that, it reinforced, I kind of thought that was important. I had an opinion on it. The dialogue reinforced it and made me realize it's even more important. So it kind of upped the ante on it for me.
So when I think about digital transformation, innovation, being change agents in an organization, I've got a ton of opinions. I think we all know that. I try my best not to bring those opinions in on a lot of these interview series, though. It's not that my thought process has changed or that what I believed had really changed. I think the interesting part was finding like-minded voices and folks that are making some of these massive organizations shift their directions. Best way I could say it helped inspire me. In a lot of the kind of interview series that I've been, not necessarily the interviewer, but more the interviewee, I talk a lot about, making small impacts in hundreds of different places to create that ripple effect that eventually changes the world. And seeing folks actually out there making those big changes and being able to sit down and spend an hour or two talking with them through that journey over the last couple of decades in their careers boils it down. It's inspirational, right? It's hearing about some of the struggles. And, as Matt had said, it's not about the technology. The technology is part of that journey, but it's really about the people, the culture, the values that they were trying to bring and how they coordinated all of that and helped drive super large organizations and some small ones even into changing the world for a better place. I want to kind of repeat one of the things that you had kind of touched on there, and that's people, process, and technology. We used to call it like the golden pillars, right? The three things that drive IT change is the way you used to talk about it in the double aughts and 90s, right? That same concept still pervades the culture. And, a lot of our interviewees talked a lot about the people and the culture and what was going on to get them motivated to the change. That focus on a standardized process so that everybody's doing things in a similar way or consistent manner. And likewise, the adoption of standardized technologies helps speed up the process. I think that's one of the things that we heard the most repeated. The more that they standardized the process and standardized the platforms that they were building on, the easier it was to make some of those cultural shifts and enable their people to skill up on those technology platforms or move to a new way of providing their product to the market. Every time that one of our interviewees started kind of digging into some of that process change because they don't want it to reduce confusion or increase speed to market, there was always that thing that came back to the people, which was an interesting thing, right? And I think we heard that a lot through all the interviews. Every time they made a technology decision or a process change that was far impacting within their organizations. It drove back because they didn't want to have to rehire everybody in their company to make that change. They wanted to make it easier to smooth the path for growth with the people that they already had.
I think it was on my mind then and now. Like, this is never ending. Is this like, it's so easy to sit around and think of these great solutions, these great modernizations. We see it ourselves within our four walls. It's really hard to push it all the way, 100%. It's really easy to get 25% of the lap, the 50% fun and easy. As soon as you get to that 75%, that 80% part, that's where things start to get hard. And specifically, it's the human aspects, I think. I think it's the energy, the wherewithal, just to push things through. And it like doesn't matter. Technology has very little to do with it. I think it's the people, the process, pushing that stuff through. I think that's the key to all this. And I don't think I necessarily know the answer on how to get that last arbitrary 25% pushed through. It hurts. It's very painful.
You're hitting on one of those pieces that I think everyone kind of talked about too, though, is the change, especially when you got that big vision, was like really easy for the first half of the project because everybody's behind it. They all see like this really positive stuff. We're making some huge changes. We're going to swing everything around. And then that last half really becomes the details. How do we operationalize this? How do we make it so that everybody can grow with it? Is it going to scale with what we need as a business in the future?
You second guess.
Yes. And the pivot points end up happening, right? Where do we have to start shifting and changing direction? Because none of these projects took less than 12 months. So that's where the pain, I think, comes in. And I think we heard that a lot, too, as we were going through it.
We heard Agile too. I recall Agile coming up as a mechanism to help absorb and buffer you against when those changes happen. But, again, like a broken record, but it's like it's the people pushing is so key in all this stuff.
One of the coolest parts about this was, kind of go back to one of your original questions. What did you expect when you started this out? And it was like, well, am I going to have 12 of the same conversations? And yeah, I don't think there was one repeat really in the entire series. So awesome stuff to have happen when you kind of run one of these interview series, right? Because we try to stay consistent in the format and like what we ask, and getting into the details seemed to always open the door to these conversations that went everywhere, which, it's a good thing that Matt and I have a little bit of admin background.
It's consensus building. I don't know, it's maybe cliched or obvious, but like if you want to influence the people, you got to build consensus across them. And I think it's making them part of the process. Again, this is almost speaking more for us internally than from these conversations, but it's like, making sure you engage your people, make them a part of it, let them change it, or, let them come up with ideas that maybe influence the direction it goes. But I think I'm stating the obvious. If you want people to be engaged in it, you got to give them a seat at the table to shape it and influence it.
I mean, just second out of that, it's not just getting a seat at the table. I think we heard pretty loud and clear too, is empowerment and delegation were some of the key words that a lot of the strong leaders that we talked to really tried to lean on. There was almost I love that you talked to me about this. And yes, I'm one of the change agents and I've loved digital transformation forever, but it wouldn't have been successful if it wasn't for the fact that I had a very strong team supporting it all the way through and driving it to done. I think that was Lori that was actually saying that from Marriott Vacation, that she really nailed it when she was talking about that.
Crypto one would be really fun now. The crypto one was kind of boring at the time. Fast forward now, holy cow, that'd be the one I'd look forward to the most now.
I had a couple of the interviews when the FTX kicked off. I think it was Motion.io that I was talking with. I was waiting to see what happened there. But my favorite was Elon Musk every time, because whenever you get a personality like that, everybody has a reaction. Everybody has an opinion about everything in this, especially when you got somebody that's that big of a character. It's always interesting to see what kind of responses you get.
I was amazed by the reactions I got, by the people pinging me. It was wildfire, which I guess I shouldn't have been amazed, right? That's how social media works. And if you put something out there interesting, people will tend to gravitate towards it. I think it speaks highly to the participants. I think their networks were a big part of that effect. And so I pleasantly surprised by the interest in side comments I got from my colleagues who actually paid attention.
The attention that all of this garnered was expected in a lot of ways, because you've got change agents that are constantly influencing their organization and their work. And anytime you get in a position like that, I guess I kind of expect that you're going to have a network of people that have done that with you over time. So I was kind of hopeful that this would happen. But at the same time, the interesting part that came out of it wasn't necessarily the attention from the people's networks, which I think was a large part of the reason they got so many views and so many people like interested in what we were talking about. But it was the things that had happened when we put it out into the world of social media and we were getting views and people engaging that weren't even involved with any of the primaries that were on the blogs. And that's the interesting part for me. The fact that it actually went outside of our sphere of normal influence. And it started percolating out through other areas. And we started getting engagement from folks that we haven't traditionally talked to. Even other organizations and other change agents are starting to look at this stuff. That was the cool part. It was seeing that butterfly effect from a simple hour-long conversation turn into quick conversations and engagement through comments and quick emails from folks. That was the kind of the really cool part when I think it was the third or fourth episode, it started getting some more traction, that we started getting some of those. And that's when I went, all right, this is actually working. I feel like we're actually put something out there that's interesting. I didn't expect to get there realistically. So it was really, really cool for that part. The only other thing I got to say on this, the way that we've kind of kept that format consistent, I thought people would start getting bored with it. No matter if we just ask those same questions over and over again, and even the hot seat, we haven't changed those. We kept things consistent. And every episode that went out was still unique. And it was still a little formulaic, yes, because there's tell us about your journey, tell us about your definition of innovation or digital transformation, give us an example, that kind of stuff. But there was such diversity in the conversation that it still made it a really unique series. Yeah, it was actually one of my favorites, and not to denigrate any of the other conversations I had, but I love that with Samira, in my career at least, right? And I don't talk a lot about this in the series, and I try not to bring in too much of my past into it, but that idea of empathy and compassion in everything that we do and how we build our teams and how we affect changes kind of been a thread that I've always tagged into. And hearing that reflected in his journey and the fact that that was priority one for everything that he was doing, honestly, yeah, it was one of those just like bulb moments. I was cheering a little bit behind the scenes. Nobody ever sees the videos of these things, but it was like, I've got somebody it's me. It's great. It's cool to hear a story that kind of reflects your own path. But because we are affecting so many people, and change is hard, change is painful. Eventually, these changes become really painful, and sometimes they actually hurt. And that can be emotional hurt, physical, what have you. But anytime you cause pain like that, making sure that we're at least aware of it and have that empathy for what they might have to go through is like critical for everything that we do. Otherwise, we're just building a technology platform and throwing it out there. The people, it always drives back to. So that was one of my favorites, just because it was one of those like, hey, I'm looking in the mirror here. So that conversation probably could have gone a lot longer. I'm glad we try to time box these.
This isn't a great answer, but it's the same thing. What I learned was, again, like other people see the importance of it. It's probably more important than even I supposed. I can't stress that enough.
Producing something like this isn't inexpensive. There's a lot of people that are involved in time, and we're asking some fairly high-level people to come and talk to us and take a couple hours out of their day to work with us on it. It's interesting how many folks, though, are more than willing to invest that time and that effort into having conversations like this and make sure that their learnings and what they've experienced can get out in the world so that someone else might be able to avoid it. I think Matt and I, when we first sat down and we were talking about the idea of even starting down this path or trying it out, even me and him were like, so wait, how much time are we going to have to spend on this? And can we do it? And it turns out, I think now, Matt, even after the first couple of them, I think we both kind of went, I'm willing to spend more time on this.
If you're natural, they're pretty easy. I think that's the key, is just being natural with it. I think what we've seen is a mellowing out, but that's indirectly related to the pandemic, right? I think it's the economy in general that's stifling things right now. And the pandemic certainly was a piece of that. But yeah, well, I think what we're in right now, I'm looking forward to kind of busting out of it. And hopefully that's what we start to see in the new year.
I'll be honest with you, I think this is all industry based. some industries and some industry verticals are going to be, for lack of a better term, kind of recession proof. They're at the point right now where they've been innovating for the last couple of years because of the COVID, and it gave them that inflection point to figure out what's going to make them more resilient and solid in the future. And they made a lot of those adjustments. I think those are the folks like healthcare. Honestly, probably going to be one of my areas where I'm going to look at, and I'm just going to go, I think they're going to come through this and just going to look at everybody and go, what were you worried about?
For both reasons too, Geremy. Like when you say that, it's like because the industry they operate in, there's a higher demand and a higher need for it. And then at the same time, they needed to look inside at how they operate, and it forced it for them too. That's a good one.
And there's some other ones out there that are like that. I mean, even the ancillary services, what we normally call digitally native businesses that support all these organizations with SaaS platforms. As much as we see a lot of tech companies letting go of people, those SaaS organizations that are releasing employees right now are also really just protecting their investments and making sure they're focusing on their core abilities. I think those are the groups that are going to see a huge surge as we move forward in the next couple of years, because there's been so much consolidation in that space. Whether it's new products coming to light market or it's those bigger behemoths like the Salesforces of the world that do a ton of SaaS work already that are going to come out way ahead because they've already got a model that's kind of working with the way that people need to engage. Higher education is what it all comes down to in my mind a lot of times. I think one of the big things that ended up happening with the pandemic was a realization that the tools that we were using in our personal lives, I think there was a reevaluation of that. And that's why Zoom kind of came out as one of the forerunners, is they were providing a product that served the need, had the features that were required, and worked more seamlessly than what we had traditionally been used. Now, I think it was also just the right people at the right time with the right message that might have had a real big impact on that. And that's where I say it's higher education, right? They ended up having that huge blitz right when everything hit, and they ended up being the forerunner for everything that needed. Even when they went down and they had a huge amount of issues for scaling, people stuck with them because they were the recognized leader at the time. And they had told people, this is what we do and this is why we were better. So it was, one, we shocked the environment, but I think really the buyers just opened their eyes a little bit more to all the other possibilities that were out there.
I think the messaging is a big part of it too. The branded marketing, and now there's so many voices that can influence you. And so if you come out, whatever it is you're coming out with, if it's cool, if you got a funny message, something catchy, it doesn't matter if you're the first, the second, the third. That's what we've seen. It seems like the second guy always wins, but I think it's all in the branded marketing.
This is cyclical. So we see this a lot. And don't get me wrong on this, because I have a lot of empathy realistically for the folks that are losing their jobs because of the volatility, specifically in the tech market right now. There's a lot of displaced people. But this type of ramp up and rapid expansion that happens in tech firms and then turns into a very fast recession fear and layoffs is something we've gone through a lot. The first big one was the dot-com bust, right? I mean, for those that were around during that period, it was something like a 50% layoff across the board. And there was a lot of people looking for jobs. We saw it again in 2004. We saw it again in 2008 when the housing market went. It hit again in 2014. And it's something that happens over and over again. And I think it's just the model of technology-based organizations to do this. They find a niche, they find a growth area, and we see some really rapid explosions of growth at the 20 to 40% year-over-year growth rates for these companies. So they hire fast. Because when you're growing that fast, you don't necessarily have time to do it organically or do it right, like we always try to say, right? You got to throw bodies at it, get it done, grow fast. But then when a contraction happens or you get into these points where the economy looks like it's going to start hitting us hard, layoffs happen. Now, hopefully it won't be super extreme this time around. Doesn't look like it's going to be yet, but I think the way we have to look at this is more of an opportunity for those folks that are getting laid off to find new homes and to go into that new rush of growth that we know is coming around the corner.
Yeah, circle of life came to my mind too. Geremy, I think that's like the first thing you said. There's definitely a cycle. I do get concerned at times about innovation getting kind of stifled in the larger houses that are out. I joke, I feel like someday we're all going to work for the same company. There's just one giant cloud thing that we work for. But, I give credit. There's a lot of energy and a lot of good stuff about how they try to drive innovation. Is dire, maybe as I think in my mind, that's where a lot of the leadership and innovation is coming from. But for those people that Geremy just mentioned, it's like, yeah, Start small, find something unique, new, and maybe that's what'll drive innovation going forward. I hope so. I think that's a good cauldron for creating things.
If we look at history too, at each of those points that I kind of comment on, right, is every time there's been a downturn, one of the things that usually happens right after is this burst of startup companies. And that innovation, I think, tends to get focused into those startups. And we end up seeing 3 to 5 years later, those are the companies that are the fastest growing or the fastest adopted companies. It's not ideal that these layoffs happen, but I'm hopeful that we're going to see the same kind of thing, that real quick explosive growth that's going to happen right afterward.
It's real, and we got to figure it out, though. It's not just something you drop in. There's a lot more energy needs to be put into the everything in front of it and everything behind it, but it's for real.
I love it because I get to be the differing voice. It is hyped right now. Don't get me wrong. I love AI. I love the concept of it. And we do have more intelligent systems. The concept of AI, though, is independent thought. And that's what we should always be guarding against and trying to measure against, in my mind. Are we going to get there? I think so. And that's the figuring out part. But right now, AI is a lot of good data scientists putting algorithms in to get those results. We aren't at the point where the machine is asking the question for us. And that's the piece I would love to see us get to. We're still asking all the questions to figure out the answers. We're not truly at the point now where some of the questions are being posed for us. Almost. So we just recently got back from reInvent, AWS's biggest conference, right? And we start talking about training models because AI, ML, anytime you talk to a hyperscaler, whether it's AWS or Microsoft or Google, they all have something that they're trying to bring to market for it, right? And conversational chatbots, because that's one of the biggest things that we've invested in as a group of technologists over the years, are so close. There's so much power, and we make a lot of use of them as we work with our clients today. There's strengths and weaknesses in the platform, and I will say it is real. ChatGPT has a fantastic approach, and we're getting better and better with different products from AWS, Azure, and GCP that are providing us frameworks to bring these things about. The amount of effort and work that it takes to create these solutions still, I really hope the systems get smarter and smarter as we go along, because we're spending a lot of time and effort making it so these systems can do this yet.
I'm not that far off from you. My foot is more on the hype side right now, only because my personal experiences. I love the idea, and I would love to see it get better over time. My personal experiences, though, especially when you factor in voice, if you weave voice into the equation too, I've been underwhelmed. I have a higher expectation from an experience perspective. I still kind of laugh. I still kind of scoff at some of the advertisements that I see for it, because I'm like, not yet.
Not arguing with you there, and that's where I think I still coach it as it's just way too much human interaction to get it so these systems actually work as seamlessly as we want them to. And it's just like the machine isn't doing it for us yet. Once it gets to the point where I can hit a button and all of a sudden it works, I will be all behind AI.
I'm WTF. I don't get it. I'm not there.
So I'll give a little color for you to this. I've been working with computers. I used to play online games all the time. The first company I ever ran hosted multi-user dimension game. That was text-based online multiplayer games back in the 90s. That was the first thing I ever did. So I love the idea of a metaverse. The problem is the WTF comes up because until we get to a point where, let's talk about a modern thing that hopefully some of our people have actually seen, Ready Player One, it's a big movie. It was a TV show. This whole idea that you could exist inside of a virtual space. Once we get to the point where we can actually do that and interact, and we have the hardware to support that experience rather than just a pair of goggles, which is VR today, then we can talk about the metaverse. I think we're not anywhere close to that. I think AI is going to have to happen before we even get into a conversation where something like the idea behind metaverse actually happens. For me, it's still real. Don't get me wrong. I think the idea of blockchain development is still a great distributed way to manage things. Crypto as a currency, on the other hand, WTF, anytime you have a currency that fluctuates more than 100% in 10 years, isn't a currency at that point. We're really talking about penny stocks at this point.
Remote work is real. I think we're better humans as a result of it. I do miss the face-to-face interaction, and I do have my moments where I remember seriously the joy of being on the train and commuting. Everybody being forced to get up and walk to lunch. I do miss some of that. I think we are sufficiently replacing it and finding other ways to exercise that muscle. I think it's real. I didn't like it. I was resistant, and now I've grown to really like it, and I think it's a better place to be.
I've been working in consulting firms for way too long. Let's just leave it there. That job's almost always been a portion remote work. Whether we're supporting somebody overseas or their office happens to be 1,000 miles away on the other side of the country. One way, shape, or form, remote work's been kind of part of my life. So the idea of a full-fledged everyone going to remote was always one of those things where I went, why not? We're spending so much money on electricity and office space and all of these other things that go into commuting, etc. Big part of the workforces that we work with don't need to be together. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm going to echo a little bit of Matt here. I miss going into the office as a group and having like a once a week being able to get everybody together and do that face to face, or literally going to an office just so we can go out for drinks afterward or to lunch for the day, right? But I think we're finding better ways to balance that. And instead of making the office the place where we socialize, creating specific social events that allow those same people to get together specifically just to get together and socialize, not just because we happen to work in the same location. So I think it's really positive, and more, the ideal behind remote work should be if you need to be in an office because it increases efficiency or because it's required for the things that you're working on. Yeah, let's make that real. Let's give the flexibility where it needs to be.
I love him. I think he's great. I enjoy him from an entertainment perspective. That he's an innovator. He's doing things differently. Whether you like what he's doing or not, he's doing things differently. And so I appreciate that.
This is one of the few places in the hot seat where I think my opinion came out more than any other place, because somebody would say something. I'm like, yeah, I got to agree with you 100% on that one. Oh, Elon has a ton of hype, but that is his personality. I wish he would focus more on the innovation portions of his world and his motivation of his employees, because I think the way that he addresses the world and then the way that he actually works are two different things. And I didn't get into this with any of the interviewees, but we kind of talked ancillary on some of it. But, if you look at the history of Tesla or SpaceX, the way that he basically created a company, did not care who was competing with it. He said, this is the vision, this is the product, and we're going to the moon. That was as simple as it was. And then he got really smart to create that vision in reality. And we need a lot more people like that in the world, because the more that we take vision and turn it into reality and turn these things into something that are useful for the world, the better everyone's going to be. And that's one of the reasons I love this hot seat question for our interviewees too, is because yes, there's a little bit of tongue in cheek in there talking about a major personality in the world, but there's also a reflection of what we admire in what he did in every single one of those. Yeah, we talked down about the Twitter stuff and the weird things that happen when he just randomly tweets out about a company's stock, right? And the fact that Dogecoin wouldn't even be a thing without some of his tweets. All of those came up at one point in these interviews, but then there's always that one little add-on that each of the interviewees would talk about. And it was whether it's the Tesla or the things he does with SpaceX, or even the, Board, his tunneling company, right? All of these things were brought up and admired in one way, shape, or form because they are doing something that's valuable for the world. I just want to call out Brittany, who has been behind the scenes on the entire series, has really been critical since we started coming up with ideas on something we could do for the year. Thank you so much for all of the work that you have put into this series, working with all of our interviewees, making sure that they're prepped up and ready for us, and that the series itself has been executed flawlessly, working with everyone here. We've had a huge crew working behind the scenes between the Jump Seat team and Troy, as along with Brittany, making sure that everything is in line so that it's really easy for Matt and I to just sit down and focus on the people we're talking to and getting that information from them.